It's Tuesday. It's 11 a.m. Central Standard Time, so that can only mean one thing, and that is that I'm here live doing your weekly 10-Minute 2-Tip Tuesday. If this is your first 10-Minute 2-Tip Tuesday, let me give you a quick rundown. I'm going to give you 2 tips in 10 minutes. The first tip is for caregivers, and the second tip, as always, is for caregiving organizations. My name is Amelia. I'm an occupational therapist. I'm the founder of Higher Standards Caregiver Training, and I am delighted to be here as always. So before we get started, let me just say that this is for educational purposes only. If I share anything or if I say anything that reminds you of someone who you think needs to be assessed or treated by a licensed healthcare provider, then please make sure that that person gets the appropriate provider, the appropriate treatment, as this is really and truly for educational purposes only. Okay, so the fall prevention event, part 2 of the fall prevention series going on this spring is happening on Friday. And so in kind of celebration of that, or to get prepared for that, I thought I would start by sharing a fall prevention tip that is related to the environment, because that's what we're going to be talking about at the fall prevention event on Friday. It's going to be about environmental hazards for fall prevention that caregiving organizations, non-medical caregiving organizations really need to be aware of and that their caregivers need to be aware of. But this is a great tip for caregivers from anywhere, from any walk of life. So this one has to do with bed height. A lot of times when we think about environment and falls, the first thing that comes to mind are rugs. And of course, rugs are a tripping hazard. They are a fall hazard in the home environment. But they're certainly not the only one. On Friday, we're going to be talking about a lot of common hazards in the environment that probably most of us are not thinking about, that you're not aware of. And one of them, though, that I'm going to be talking about specifically is bed height. Bed height can have a huge impact on someone's fall risk. And it's not just the bed being too high, but in fact, it can actually be the bed being too low. So for tip number 1 today, what we're going to be talking about is when bed height is too low and why that can actually lead to a fall risk. Because it's not one that most people commonly would think about. And of course, again, at the Fall Prevention Series Part 2 on Friday, we're going to be going over this in more detail. But I thought it'd be good to talk a little bit about now. And as you can see, I've kind of rearranged things. I moved the hospital bed away. I pulled down the Murphy bed so it could be a little bit lower to kind of demonstrate what might be an issue when a bed is too low for someone. Particularly when someone's knees are above their hips, that can be a big problem. That's not quite the situation that I have here because I'm not that tall. But this is as low a bed surface as I could do for today. And certainly for some people, if they have a lot of lower extremity weakness, then this could be a bed height that could be too low, that could lead to increased fall risk. Okay, so why can a low bed lead to increased fall risk? Well, a lot of times if we're thinking about bed height and fall risk, we're thinking about things being too high, right? So people's feet not touching the floor. So on sort of a face level, this maybe kind of looks okay because at least my feet are on the floor, right? And that definitely is a big deal. We want people's feet on the floor. But if I have a lot of weakness in my lower body, if I have troubles with mobility or with standing, and I'm too low, that means that I'm going to have to put in a huge effort to get up to stand. That means I might not be successful the first time I'm trying to stand, so I might have to do a lot of rocking. I might come up and come forward and fall forward. Or I might come up and not make it all the way and fall backwards onto the bed. There are pretty easy ways that you can actually fix this kind of problem with different equipment, different strategies. And again, we're going to go over that kind of specifically in the fall prevention event on Friday. But it's something that I want everyone to be aware of, that just because someone's feet are not on the floor doesn't necessarily mean that that bed height is okay, or that that chair height is okay, and that that person isn't at risk of falling because of the height of the bed or other piece of furniture. A lot of times what people will kind of self-solve, they'll come to their own kind of solution for this kind of issue, particularly when we're thinking about like recliners or couches. A lot of times people will get those lift chairs, those automatic lift chairs that help them to come to a stand. I really, really want to caution anyone out there who's thinking about this. Please make sure before you make a decision to get an automatic or an electric lifting chair or a lifting recliner, check with your healthcare provider first. There's a very, very, very small group of people for whom those can be appropriate, but for many people, they can actually end up increasing fall risk because they can actually end up increasing the weakness that the person has in their legs. So if you think about it, if you're not having to use your legs at all, if you have a piece of equipment that is pushing you up to a stand for you, then that's going to make your legs weaker, and that's actually going to increase your fall risk in scenarios like this, where the bed or another surface is kind of low. So again, this is actually a complex scenario. I don't recommend that you go out and that caregivers go out and try to solve this problem on their own. This is really a situation where you want to get in touch with a licensed healthcare provider, with a therapist, who can do an appropriate assessment and make appropriate recommendations for what the best strategy is to do versus going out and getting a specific piece of equipment on your own. So that is tip number one today, really thinking about bed height, and not even just bed height, but just surface height in general, and how we go about solving that problem to make people safe to get up from heights that are low. And again, I really do recommend, that's a complex issue. I recommend that you get in touch with a licensed healthcare provider to help you work through that and make sure you come up with a solution that's going to make things better versus making things worse in that scenario. Okay, that's tip number one, though. Let's move on to tip number two, which is for caregiving organizations. This is going back to a tip that I have shared in the past, but it's something that I have seen coming up a lot recently with organizations that I've been speaking to, and it's this need for a very clearly defined training and training documentation process, okay? This is important for so many reasons. One, because the fact is your caregivers are facing a ton of different scenarios. They are in and out of different environments. They're with clients who have a wide array of different issues and conditions and problems and needs. It's very difficult to make sure that your caregivers are actually able to meet those needs in the way that you need them to and the way that your clients need them to without making sure that you have a high frequency, high quality training process. So that's just from a pure quality, wanting to make sure that you're doing the best thing that you can for your clients and for your caregivers. On the other side of that, though, we want to make sure that that process is documented, right? We want it documented for a few reasons. One, because if the process itself is documented, if it's something that is well known in your organization, if everyone knows that this is the process and this is how we do it, you're going to get a lot better participation and uptake from your caregivers with that training process. So just making sure the process itself is documented is really important in order to have that training program be effective. The other side of that, though, is you want the training itself to be documented, not just the process, right? Because inevitably, unfortunately, when you are providing care for people, there are many circumstances that you can't always control. Things won't always go perfectly. At some point, sometime, something is probably going to go wrong. When that does go wrong, and again, we want to use training to to decrease the amount of times. We want to make sure that as little as possible is going wrong for your clients or your organization. And training is key to that. But inevitably, when something does happen, you want to make sure that you have documented that you have provided the adequate training, the right training, to your caregivers in those situations so that you can show that you are doing everything that you possibly can to prevent these situations from happening in the first place. It's key for the actual prevention, and it's key to protect your organization when sometimes things do go wrong and things happen. So that's really what I wanted to kind of put in your head today for caregiving organizations, is thinking about what is your training process? How do you have that process documented so that you can keep your caregivers using it and engaged? And then how are you actually documenting that training? It can be a really big job. It can be very difficult to do. That's why I spend my full work life now doing it and helping people do that. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. And certainly, if you want to attend the fall prevention series, part 2 is coming up this Friday at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. Please feel free to register for it. It's a completely free event. It is educational. And we're going to be going over a lot of different environmental factors that can lead to falls. We're also going to talk about how we can get our caregivers, we can help caregivers to recognize those environmental fall risks, how we can help our caregivers to report them, and then what you as caregiving organizations can actually do about those things once you get the report. So again, if that's something you're interested in, if it's a priority for you, make sure that you sign up so that I can get that information to you this Friday. And with that, that is it for me today, for today's 10-Minute 2-Tip Tuesday. I hope that you enjoyed this information. Until next week, please take care, be healthy, take care of each other, your clients, your caregivers. Until next time, guys, I'll see you later.